geographically allows us to put much more focused attention on specific areas to ensure that we're in a position to deliver. And it also allows us to work in those particular locations to look at where we have deficits, where do we need to increase our production, making sure we have timely responses and ownership of those issues that are occurring. So I will pause there for now, and I'll ask Mr. Brian Williams to identify some of the projects that we have ongoing and those that we've completed, and then I'll speak to you in a moment after. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Etienne. Pleasant good morning to you in attendance, all protocols observed. Thank you. See you for coming and gracing us with your presence. Welcome. It has not gone unnoticed, and it is very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Etienne, Corporate Communications, for allowing us to pull this thing together so that we can start the conversations with Tobago at large as it relates to the business of providing you with a quality water and wastewater service. Good morning to the media, good morning to the wider Tobago and the listening public wherever you are. My name is Brian Williams. I have been recently appointed, as this year would have introduced me, as the Director the Tobago Water Management District. I am honored, and I give the commitment, I have given it to them, and I give it to you, the listening public, that I will do all that is in my power to be the emissary that is required and needed by you all in the execution of the services associated with the portfolio. At this point, I just want to introduce, or at least have my team introduce themselves, because while he mentioned the CEO mentioned the leadership team, I think it's important that we put some faces to it so that we understand the people who will be tasked, in addition to Brian Williams and the rest of the organization, to serve you as we carry out the mandate that we have been given. So what I'll do, I'll just pass the mic there and have my people just introduce themselves and say what the functional areas are. All right.
Hi, good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. I am Colin Orr, and my position in the authority is Assistant Director, Plants, Water Sourcing, and Distribution. My core responsibilities are for the operation at the plants and the distribution of the water produced by the plants. I'd hand you over to the next Assistant Director, Tariq.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Orr. Let's show appreciate it.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tariq Wadi. I'm the Assistant Director, Asset Maintenance Tobago. My responsibility is repairing all assets and facilities and ensuring that they are reliable and ready to be used when called upon. Thank you very much.
Pleasant morning, everybody. My name is Harvey Williams. I am the Director for Projects and all new related projects. All years in Tobago. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. That's the three gentlemen who would have introduced themselves, Mr. Colin Orr, Mr. Tariq Wadi, and Mr. Harvey Williams. They form the executive level the management district, and in addition to the other 13 newly minted team leads who are in attendance here, we have the responsibility of managing the operations and the needs of the Tobago listening public. Excuse me. All right. Thank you. Just to bring information to the public, I just tell you who these people are. We have Mr. Andrew Daniel. We have Mrs. Kadia Francis. We have Miss Giselle Webster, Mr. Sean Roberts, Vernon Wilson, Mr. Kian Thomas, Miss Diane Cunningham, Mr. Boxell Bailey, and Miss Diane Adams. We have Miss Lana Bristol, who is part of the team, but she is not at her best today, so she has asked to be excused, but she is very much present here in spirit, I am sure. Could you, thank you, welcome yourselves to part of the management of the organization. At this point, wow. At this point, I want to take a couple of minutes to, as the CEO would have alluded to, bring to you an idea, an update on where we have been in the past, in the recent past, and continues as it relates to projects which are aimed at improving the levels of service to you, the customer. The projects, the work that we are doing fall into a number of different categories, of which projects is one. I want to just take a minute and give you the distinction. The projects are divided into some subheads. The first would be projects to win new water to allow an increase in our ability to distribute. The group of that distribution from the plant to the customers. Other projects, the other grouping would be the strategic pipelines associated with getting the customers and across different supply zones to allow us to take water from areas that neighboring supply zones as per need in the moment or as it arises. I just want to take a few minutes to just give you some specifics on some of the projects that we have been undertaking in the recent. So the one that is front and foremost, we have the design and construction of intake, 2.1 imperial million gallons on the Goldsboro River. We have a sod turning ceremony that is guarded. They will be kept up to date as and when it unfolds, but the sod turning ceremony is guarded for next week. We had the desilting of the Hillsborough Dam, which resulted in Hillsborough Dam, the dam returning to its design capacity of 220 million imperial gallons. We have construction of several boosters, including Pine Hill Booster, Highlands Road Booster, Cuthill Booster, Hope Trace, and we are in the process of constructing 2 boosters at James Street, Goodwood, and the Castara Housing Development. Other projects aimed at improving our levels of service. We are in the process of the construction of a 50,000 imperial gallon water tank at Bloody Bay, and the upgrade of the 2 Bloody Bay boosters, number 1 and 2, with a view to bringing to an end the challenges that the customers that go up that Bloody Bay Hill have been experiencing. Additional projects. The outfitting of the Sherburne Road booster was completed last year. Strategic pipelines were laid along the highway Apex to Crown Point, 7.4 kilometers of 16-inch ductile iron piping from Signal Hill to Apex, which allowed us to take water from the farm well, the well systems, and as far as Hillsborough Dam into the Crown Point system as and when a need arises. The organization has been very much involved in improving from an operational and planning standpoint. And this has begun with the development of a 5-year capital investment plan from which looked at the needs of the Tobago and the plan was developed in alignment with the The process is ongoing, and all the projects that we are undertaking would be construction units from this particular program of works. And the intent and express view is to bring improvement to the level of service across all of Tobago. Have been completed and are in train. We have a comprehensive program of works which are geared at improving the level of service on a consistent basis, consistent and sustained. So that brings me to the end of giving you updates of the project. So I'd ask the CEO if you could just welcome him back to the mic with a round of applause, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone. So Brian would have initially started introducing his staff, his employees, and as I promised, we will eventually go down into some of those details in terms of our whole transformation process and so on, but we won't be able to do that at this time. We do need to have a number of specific conversations also with several stakeholders. We also need to make sure that the plans as they unroll, however much they may be refined on the ground, that they continue to be relevant as well. One of the things I should have mentioned is that while we are pursuing projects in general, and Brian nicely laid out, I think, those facilities or those projects that we're looking at, first of all, in terms of production, increasing our production, i.e. the additional augmentation of new water to the supply system. We are aware that given the undulating territory in Trinidad, that we have what we call discrete distribution systems, and therefore it's not as easy to transfer water from one area of surplus to an area of deficit, or to the water-rich areas, as Mr. Williams sort of put it, to those that are deficit as well, in the deficit as well. And that's a fact that we have been having to deal with for some time, not only here, but throughout the region where we are dealing with volcanic islands and hilly landscapes. Climate change is also a significant factor that affects the way in which we can manage and produce water. For those wells that might be on the coastline or close to the close sea, those are always the ones that are in danger of going saline outside of the water that we extract from the rivers. Here in Tobago, I think we have 7 surface water treatment plants, and we have at least 25 wells, which is the sum of most of our production for Tobago. There are other options in the cards. We have to be open to that. We can't just rely on the traditional means of producing water. I would say, however, that Tobago is pretty much advanced in terms of Trinidad and where Trinidad is, in terms of augmenting or continuing to develop its own production on the landscape. And we're pretty pleased with where Tobago is and where it is going in terms of its 24-hour supply from a reliability standpoint. But let me pause there and open our conversation to your input, I should say. Thanks.
Good morning, CEO. Elizabeth Gonzalez from Guardian Media. I remember, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, the minister spoke about reaching a goal where we would have 24/7 water supply. Based on where we are now and your assessment, how real is that dream?
I think it is real. The question is really one of timing. The question is really one of funding. Whenever you're dealing with a water utility, and WAS in particular, and given the vastness of the authority and the landscape which we're working with, and given how spread the population is, some are in quarters that are difficult to reach, it means that considerable funding is required. And sometimes in our prioritization, we aim to satisfy those densely populated areas because you get better bang for buck. And let me explain. Not that anyone else is less important, but basically you're able to supply or deal with the needs of much more people than those who are far more remote. But the further remote you are, the higher you are in elevation, the more difficult it is to get to you, the much more cost it is for the authority. Part of the authority's expenses also revolves around its ability to pump. So we carry a significant electrical cost, and this is a cost that we have to find ways of mitigating as well. So it's not just a matter of getting the capital or the capex to be able to fund the projects and to extend our distribution systems. We also have to be able to maintain it. We also have to be able to pump.
I was actually hoping to hear more about water conservation from you. The discussion on water meters, it is still alive in Trinidad and Tobago after it was brought up some time ago. Do you think that that is an ideal solution?
Water conservation is something I spoke about pretty much in my last interview last week in Trinidad. Given the phrasing of your question, I didn't quite pick up that was what you were getting at. But we have to pursue water conservation, and I've said over and over again here and elsewhere, it has not only to be a reactionary effort that we make during the dry season. It has to become habitual. And we have to make sure that this is inculcated in our culture and that people understand that water is expensive, it is a scarce resource, and we have to find ways of covering those costs. And that leads into the metering. Metering really does a number of things, and it is something we have to pursue at some point. What it does is to hold each of us accountable for our water usage. We have to move to the point where, as citizens, we are very responsible for our own water management. And the metering in most countries really push us towards that inevitability. Having said that, we understand that water is viewed as a social good. It is a critical, essential service. And the way in which you manage that has to take into account those who in the society who may be so challenged. And therefore, it is not a very simple thing to just say we're just going to meter. It's not a very simple thing to say that the end result is just metering. It is a complex issue that must be addressed, and it must be addressed with policy decisions, bold decisions in some instances, but it must be addressed and confronted on several fronts.
All right. Good morning, Candice Jackson. Good morning, Candice Jackson from Tobago Updates. Hi, yes. So my first question is in regards to considering desalination plants for Tobago. I know the idea was bandied about a little bit earlier in recent times, but could you give us an idea of Wasa'S perspective on using that solution for Tobago in light of just some of the changes that we're experiencing in climate and otherwise that are affecting our water sources?
Okay, I've spoken about climate change, which all of us are quite familiar with. We don't even call it climate change, it's now climate crisis. Climate crisis, to the extent it's not going to go away, and to the extent that it will continue to impact everything we do even more negatively. WASA has not been exempt for obvious reasons from that. And in our discussions and deliberations, which would have started before my installation, that would have been something that's on the cards. It would be remiss of us to sit and say, oh, we're not looking at this, we're not looking at that. So everything has been considered, and as new ideas pop up, they're considered as well. There is a facility that was scoped and is awaiting refinement and some funding that is supposed to be developed, I believe it's in the east, Charlottesville. Thank you for that. So we are already actively pursuing in several areas a means of water production through that type of methodology.
Okay, and then in regards to the relationship between WASA and the THA, and speaking as it specifically relates to road repairs, because we know WASA is a major challenge for our road infrastructure. What can you tell us about whether it is reviving an MOU that was in existence several years ago, where WASA worked with the THA to have roads repaired in a reasonable time to ensure that, we're not causing further problems in our road infrastructure?
Thank you for the question, Candice. I think you've jumped a little ahead of me. I am to meet with the THA as well. My staff is seeking to put that in place. So I'll speak to that issue generally for our utility company. And not because we are any less sensitive to our need to be timely in terms of our response to at least be able to restore or reinstate the roadworks and so on. But simply, it has, like most other things, a function in many instances of finance. Our ministry has been aggressively pushing us to make sure that as of this month, we start making corrections. We start making efforts to make sure that we can get some of this, if not most of it, behind us. And we've committed to do so. So for instance, in Trinidad, there was another MOU we had with a contractor that came back up this month that we have basically reestablished, and we're pushing forward on getting it done. Simply put, there are thousands of road repairs that we still need to do. We are able to do the restorations very quickly in terms of filling the holes, filling the gaps, etc., which most people may not see because, unfortunately, the rains inevitably wash out that road fill or that mile fill that we will put in place. And then we have to refill it and refill it again if we're not able to do the pitch or lay the pitch. We're trying to solve that because it becomes unproductive, it is inconvenient, it becomes a hazard. And that is why I say we're no less sensitive. And at the end of the day, we want to manage that cost. So my short answer to you is yes, we will be certainly pursuing that in earnest. It is a serious part of our mandate. It is something that we try to budget for as well, both in Tobago and Trinidad.
Can you give me some specifics as to what are the changes you're going to be making where that is concerned? What are the systems that you're going to put in place to ensure that, what has been a problem for Wasa and the rest of the country does not continue?
The process we have looked at. I reference the fact that we need to be a lot more timely. And in the main, I think we are beginning to get there. We have a significant number of leaks that occur daily. The division in the island geographically, if I can refer to Trinidad as well as Tobago, is one of the first steps in doing that, making sure we bring focused attention to those particular locales that may have the incidence of road restorations. I can tell you, for instance, when we look at it geographically, we have quite a much more road reinstatements to do in south than perhaps northwest. So we've been looking at them. I know the specific numbers, which I won't go into right now. But first of all, identifying a process that works and a structure that is aligned to it is what we have done. Secondly, in terms of the process, just making sure response to the availability of equipment and manpower and crews also has also been looked at. And just last week, coincidentally, we were looking at how else can we augment those crews to make sure that we can deliver. Now, to the second part of that, the MOU that we had established, for instance, in Trinidad, we have reached out and we're trying to make sure we put that in place. There is a request for proposals that was sent out to make sure that we can supply that need, meet that need. But in the interim, we have a specific proposal that we're pursuing so that we can engage in that. So I'm saying all of that to say that it is very active. It is very much on the table, and we are dealing with it. And those are specific steps for the moment that we're looking to take. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
And then, as you mentioned, leak, you sort of preempted my next question in terms of, what are the measures that you are putting in place to deal with leaks? Because I know that there's several continuously reported. I mean, sometimes it will be reported, Wasa comes fix it, it continues to leak. And I know that there's some problem with the aging infrastructure and so on. But what are you doing differently as you're approaching leaks?
I feel, Candice, that you've been sitting in our meetings. What I would say, it's being tackled again from a number of fronts. I'll start with the end, the interaction with consumers. We have, as you know, a mobile app that we've been using, and that mobile app has been reformulated, and it is being designed to give the customer a much more interactive experience, feedback, and a tracking mechanism for all leaks requests that are sent to WASA. We should be able to roll that out very shortly. I'm optimistic that we should get there by the end of the month, but allow me a grace period for another 2 weeks, simply because it's being tested. And whenever you put something in a testing environment, you don't know what's going to come up. Now, behind the scenes, as you would have been introduced, I believe, in June or July, is the introduction of our Operation Control Center. That Operation Control Center basically is a fantastic facility, really quite impressive, and we can speak about that another time. But that in itself is what's supporting that app to make sure that we have the right linkages from a technology standpoint to our contact center, and to be able to create dashboards that we use internally to track and to respond as well through the creation of worksheets for the various crews. And that is why I was saying that from a process standpoint, a lot of work has been done. So I'm going into more detail now. But the point is, that is one area from the customer interaction standpoint that we're doing to make sure that we can retard or mitigate higher or continued incidences where we're not able to respond. The other area of it is to deal with non-revenue water, more to the point, unaccounted for water. Last year we would have put on a water loss conference, and this year we should be doing that, which brings together utility companies across the island, which allows us to share ideas and information as to how we can progress or reduce the element of non-accountable water. Trinidad has actually been driving this, perhaps unaware to you, because it's a very costly affair. But we have recognized that if it is that we're producing $1 million gallons of water, and we're losing, let's say, 400,000, that's significant. And that's significant extent that is water that we're not making revenue on, and that is water that we're spending money on. So managing unaccounted for water is one way we can track what's happening in terms of water leaks and losses. But to the point I'm making really is this, that if we can tackle that and tackle it aggressively, then we should be able to see less leaks, less loss of water. Because what is happening right now is, as you lose water, you tend to pump more water. When you pump more water so you can reach extremities, you put your pipelines or your network under pressure. And when you put your network under pressure, the incidence of bursts and leaks would increase, given the fragility of some of our aged network. In addition to that, using technology or using devices such as PRVs, where we know that the pressure may be too high in some areas, or the reverse, using our VFDs, variable frequency drives, which is a form of pressure management, and a number of other pressure management devices and systems that we use, will allow us to gauge the flows or the pressure, and therefore automatically respond, so that where the pressure is too high, we know we need to reduce it, and where it's too low, we need to ramp it up or to examine what is happening. So again, that's all in a bid to reduce incidence of leaks. So there are several things that are being tackled at the same time as well.
Elizabeth Williams, TV6 News, I-95, and the Express newspaper.
Yes.
Just wanted to know the number of new wells that are in Tobago at this time to assist in terms of the water process, and also what has been instituted, especially in Southwest Tobago, to ensure that hotels and guest houses don't suffer from a lack of water.
Tobago currently has 25 wells, and I know that Brian's team is currently examining whether or not we need to install or dig or place additional wells. We can't just dig a well because we think that it will assist. We have to look at the topography of the land and examine the appropriateness of the well. We also have to look at the linkages or the distribution system to see whether or not it would add value. And one of the things I was sharing this morning, for instance, if you have a particular aquifer or basin and you're pumping from that reason, and you will have done a well test, and you do your saline test or other comparable tests over a period of time to make sure sustainable, just sticking another straw into that set of water, so to speak, does not necessarily mean that you're going to be able to guarantee additional water. So the well management has to be carefully crafted and a very scientific project or set of activities. So we have 25, as I said, and we're going to continue to explore and see where else we can add those wells. For the hotels, particularly in Southwest, I'll ask Brian to respond a little bit more about that, and he may be able to tell you, given the currency of the situation or the seasonality that the season we're in, some of the measures that we are taking place. I think you would have alluded to at least 6 of them, Brian. Thanks.
Thank you so much. As it relates to wells, we have just some added information. There are 2 additional wells at Mary's Hill. We have, during the last dry season, we would have developed one of those 3 wells, and it would have added 0.3 imperial million gallons into the system, which would have helped the Corland system and by association and extension, Southwest Tobago, Crown Point, to make it through that dry season that we had last season. To start with your question at the beginning, there are 2 additional wells that we are in the process of equipping to provide an additional 350,000 imperial gallons in that area, so that we have an additional 0.6 million gallons that we didn't have at the start of the dry season last year, an additional 0.3 million gallons that we to augment the supply to the Southwest and the Corland supply zone. Just some added information. The Bard Hill wells have also, in conjunction with the development of the Bard Hill wells, we also developed the Bard Hill tank site, where we installed some boosters. The intention of that system is that we can now, in addition to sending the water to support Southwest, we can also use the added water and the system of boosters which have been developed at the tanks, the newly painted tanks at Bard Hill, to assist in the extremities of the Hillsborough Dam system. So this year would have alluded earlier to having transmission, being able to take water from one zone to the next, water-rich to water-starved areas, and that whole program of works, which included the upgrade of the Bard Hill tank site, the painting and the upgrading of the tanks, the installation of the boosters, the installation of one well, which will soon, by hope, before the end of the dry season, be the installation of 2 additional wells. The express intent is to provide new water to support any possible shortfalls in the upcoming dry season to Southwest and the tourism belts that you would have mentioned earlier. An added benefit is that we can now, by virtue of the work that was done by the development team in Tobago with the group of young people I would have introduced you to, we are now also able to send the water in the opposite direction into the Hillsborough Dam system and allow for the support at the extremities on an as and when required basis. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Williams.
Just to add, with respect to the dry season, every year we do a carefully crafted water augmentation or dry season or drought plan. And one has been drafted. So while Brian hinted at some of the initiatives on the way, the plan itself is almost finalized. It's to be discussed with our stakeholders, and our stakeholders include our ministry, our board, and RIC. And once we've had all of that feedback, we'll be able to share the broader plan with you as well. Thanks.
Pleasant morning, Carissa Douglas, TTT Limited. CEO, you touched on water conservation and addressing the culture of persons with regards to understanding the value of water. I know in the past, WASA would have used the social media a lot to highlight ways that you could conserve water, what part the public could play. But under your leadership, have you all started discussions as to other innovative ways that WASA is going to address or work to adjust the quality and the mindset of the public as it relates to conservation?
WASA has had what I call, or what we call, a very strong social contract in terms of its interaction with the public, internally, and with all of its stakeholders, including our ministry and a number of ministries. The social agenda that we have put forward, and is, at least for January and February, was certainly crafted, and the set of activities that we hope to push on includes a significant element of water conservation. Water conservation, to our mind, starts with each and every one of us. It starts with WASA in terms of what we do and our concern for the leaks and the loss of water. It starts with our staff in terms of sensitizing them to what needs to happen. It starts with the notion that everyone has to understand that you have to be responsible for your own water usage. And paying for it sometimes is a way to reinforce that. But where we have been using social media, and I'm hoping everyone noticed, over the last 2 months at least, we've certainly ramped up our communication, and we've ramped up our social media interaction to boost and do just that. So outside of introducing the new ELT, Executive Leadership Team, and the changes at the top, we've certainly been trying to make sure that our messaging is consistent in that regard as well. So the short answer to the is that, yes, we're certainly doing that, but there are other elements that will feature in such a drive as well.
Okay, my second and last question with regards to the dry season, as you touched on. I know the THA would have been having some training as it relates to fire prevention with representative of the fire service, etc. I don't know if Mr. Williams or you, CEO, could touch on this, whether WASA has been part of the discussions as it relates to wildfires in the event that we do see these things happening, what role WASA will play and is ready to play in addressing and responding to these incidents.
Thank you for your question. Yes, we have been involved with the fire services, and I just want to give you some more information. As an organization attempting to be responsible partners with the institution, we have reached out to them, especially against the backdrop of the couple of fires we had in the recent past, where we identified that there were some challenges in the infrastructure, the fire service infrastructure, as it relates to the operation, maintenance, and operability of the network of fire hydrants. We would have reached out to them, and we would have offered to partner with them to ensure, one, that we get them tested, get them up to speed, and allow for any challenges that would come, that where the need would be available, the readiness and available will be up to mark. So yes, the process has started, it is ongoing, and we have extended the invitation to them to come, let's work together to get these things up and running so that we can make Tobago a fire-free place.
Good morning, Lavia and Cupid Radio Tambrin, Mr. CEO. Welcome back to Trinidad and Tobago, and welcome to WASA. WASA has always been trending topic throughout Trinidad and Tobago, so I want to touch a bit on financial management. I remember in 2023, information was released that WASA would be engaging on a project to dig more wells, so to cut the cost. I think it was quoted in millions of US dollars that we spend on desalinated water per year. How is that going, and how your introduction into WASA and into financial management on WASA as a whole?
Okay, so you've asked me a few things. I'll start with the wells. The well development program is well underway, and I would have indicated earlier that it was designed specifically to assist us in increasing our production or augmenting our water supply in specific locales, and particularly given the fact that we have discrete areas of our distribution system. And it is not always easy to move water from one area to another, whether it's because of the undulating territory, whether it's because of distance, whether it's because of quantum or volume. So, for instance, we are actively driving on the development of a treatment plant and wells in Santa Cruz, which will allow us to reduce the water that we're using from the Caroni treatment plant that we send to the north, central, and south. If it is that we can reduce water being produced in one area, or we can then direct Caroni as a larger supplier to send water, let's say, further south, which means we'll be able to reach more of the extremities. I'm just using that example to explain that what's happening. But the last award I saw, for instance, for wells numbered at least 10 in one instance, 2 in the next, another instance, and another 2. So at least 14 wells, by my recollection, that were actively under consideration, some of which will be on the award, rather, some of which should be started shortly. So that is a way of augmenting our traditional sources of water outside the surface, outside the desal that you know, because it is necessary. In this kind of climate, in this time with climate change challenging us, and given the high variability we're seeing of rainfall and how it affects our rivers, we must build in resiliency. So even if we weren't doing that just to supply water augmentation in specific areas, I think we would have had to consider it for resiliency as well. Your second question relates to, I believe, finance and what is...
And was the project, was it able to cut the cost in the desalination water that we purchased?
I'm not in a position to comment on that, in all honesty, simply because I'm not aware of the specific numbers offhand. But that is something we can always get back to you on. But I know desalination is a costly affair. Putting wells in place, wells is basically groundwater extraction. When you look at the cost of producing water, surface water is usually cheapest, then groundwater, then desal, just in a general way. So whenever you have to go the route of desalination, it is a much more costly affair for us.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I don't see any other hands coming up, so I think we're perilously close to wrapping up. Yes? I think this has been a very successful engagement, and as I indicated on the opening, this is the first of a series of conversations. And it was very important for Brian, Director Williams, to introduce his assistant directors and his support team, so that not only do we add faces to the names, and I know this is Tobago, and everybody know everybody, but it's very important that we know that there is a system in place that you can have meaningful discussion and engage meaningfully on a day-to-day basis as we continue to improve our service delivery. So having said that, we will wrap things up. Director Williams, do you have any outstanding concerns or contributions you wish to share?
I would just want to speak to the customer side of the equation. At Wasa'S, we are in the fortunate position in that all our employees are also customers. It puts us in a very unique and different position where charity begins at home. I wanted to widen it out to us because conservation was mentioned a number of times during the course of the day. And I think that this is not focused on enough, because the need that we have when we do have water can be managed and mitigated when we as customers do what we have to do. The overflowing tanks that feed in the dashing patches and all these kinds of things, we need to be our neighbor's keeper and our region's keeper, because the way the system is configured, when you're at the bottom of the hill and your tank is overflowing, you're preventing the people from the top of the hill getting a supply. So I just want to exhort the public to do their part in one, doing the housekeeping in terms of ensuring that from your boundary inwards to where you dwell, that you do the necessary and the needful to ensure that you practice proper conservation and that you continue to represent and present to us all the challenges as you see them on the outside. You have a leak by here, we have a this, you have a that. So keep seeing it and saying it so that we can continue to work together with a view of making the supply and the service the best it possibly can be. Thank you.
Just to add a few closing remarks as well. And I thank Brian for his words because they ring home, and I'm hoping that they ring home with each and every one of you as well. You should have seen by now, and I said it before, but I really want to make sure that you are feeling it, that there has been a bit of a change in terms of our engagement, certainly with yourselves, an engagement through social media, and an engagement in terms of a regularity of communicating with you, all that is happening within the confines and outside the confines, but those that affect WASA. To the extent that we can making every effort to make sure that we're being very transparent with you. And that not only are we confronting the ills or the bad or the issues that and complaints that come to us in terms of our redress, but we're also going to sing our praises because we have not done that. We're also going to share our success stories because we have not done that very well. And we will do it with the equal regularity that we deal with the other issues because our successes and achievements far outweigh what is being put out there as being negative or deleterious, so to speak. So that's a commitment that we're willing to give to you, that level of engagement. The other thing I want to emphasize, because I don't think it can be underscored enough, is that there's significant projects occurring, significant projects that are receiving strong support at the level of the ministry, at the level of our minister, at the level of the boards who have been keenly so driving the achievement of several of these projects, because we are all very sensitive to the mandate, which is the supply of reliable potable water on a 24-hour basis. In addition to that, we're paying very keen attention to the wastewater division in terms of what needs to be done and in terms of making sure that we are in compliance wherever we're required. So, and to discuss some of those issues. Thanks.
As we wrap up, I just want to beg the indulgence of the members of the media. I know we may want to hold on to see you and have our own little one-on-one, but I'm asking that we defer that engagement. We'll be back next week for the sod turning ceremony. So CEO is actually a couple minutes behind. He has to race back to a meeting in Trinidad. But it was important for us to come here outside of the confines of a ceremony to establish this means of communication and indicate to you in a very significant way that we intend to communicate like this very often and in a very respectful and meaningful manner. So if you do see you being whisked away, it's not that he's trying to evade you, it's just that we have honored this commitment above all others on Wednesday morning, but we have to get to the next one. So thank you very much. And as you take leave of this space, please get to your respective destinations safely. God bless you all.